Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Human Biography Podcast. On today's episode, I have Darrell Hall. Now, Darrell is an academic. He's an author. He's got really great subject matter that I'm really wanting to dive into. Now, Darrell, welcome to the Human Biography Podcast.
Oh, great to be here.
Now, Darrell and I got to meet earlier this year, and I attended one of your lectures. And without giving my version of it, can you tell me a bit about the lecture and a little bit about the topic, and then we'll get into our conversation today. Yeah.
Well, the talk that you came to was about suffering and evil. It was basically, how could a good, loving, all-powerful God allow for suffering and evil and still be considered good, loving, and all-powerful?
Yeah.
And it's considered one of the strongest arguments against the existence of God.
Wow.
And so it needs to be addressed. Like for anybody who's of faith, then you have to address that question. Because if he is good and loving, then why so much evil in the world?
Yeah.
If he is all powerful, couldn't he do something about it?
Yeah.
And then the question is, well, can you address this? And the thing is, that's what my book does, that's what my talk does. It tries to address that topic. But of course, you address it from a philosophical standpoint. You address it from a theological standpoint. But most importantly, you address it from a personal standpoint.
Yeah.
So you need all three areas.
I think when I think about that subject matter, and I think about people who've said, something really bad has happened in their life, and they're like, how could God allow this? Like, there's no God. Like I've seen some people say, you know what? I can't believe there's a God if this happened. But when I listen to your lecture, there's the good comes with the bad, or whatever you want, whatever we call bad is, there's a balance. And can we go further into that sort of topic, that idea, and talk about faith as well? Like, I grew up very spiritual, going to the Hindu temple. I've gone to synagogues. I've gone to Christian churches, and heard a lot of great lectures. But what is faith in this sort of realm?
Okay, well, if you're dealing with faith is a worldview. It's a lens by which you interpret the reality in which you live. So every faith, therefore, has to address four broad questions. Origins and identity. Who am I? Who or what created me? That's really important.
That's right.
And then you got to go to meaning and purpose. Why am I here? Do I matter? Do I have any value? Then you have to look at morality. Is there any particular set of code of conduct or behaviors or way that my life should be lived, or that I'm morally obligated to live my life in a certain way?
That's right.
Am I held accountable to a certain standard or to a way of life? So that's the morality of it. And then finally, every worldview, every faith has got to deal with destiny.
Yes.
What happens to me when I die?
Yeah.
Does anything happen to me when I die? So it's got to address all four of those. And then you've got to look at every worldview, and faith is, well, does it have correspondence? And by that, what I mean is, does it correspond to the reality you see in the universe, in the world, and in yourself and in those around you? Does it correspond?
Yeah.
In other words, does it have some sort of empirical, factual adequacy to it?
Yes, that's right.
Right? It has to have that. Second of all, is it's got to be coherent. By coherent, I simply mean it's got to be logically consistent in its thinking and its propositions.
Yes.
And lastly, I think it has to be experientially relevant. Now, what do I mean by that?
Yeah.
Experientially relevant. Well, does it work? Does it make a difference? Does it lead to positive change?
Wow.
So every worldview, I think, has to look at that. And then when you talk about faith and belief, now there's two different words.
Sure.
We usually use them interchangeably, and we usually use them as if they mean the same thing.
That's right.
Actually, technically they're different.
They are different. Okay.
So, for example, I could have an intellectual belief in something,
Yes.
but not have a faith in it. What does that mean? Faith means I have trust and commitment to it.
Trust and commitment.
Trust and commitment is faith.
Yes.
I can have a belief, like an intellectual belief. Like, for example, in the Bible, it says even the demons believe and know God. Well, they know about him. They believe in his existence. They don't disbelieve in him.
Yeah.
Let me use a different story.
Sure.
Story of a tightrope walker.
Okay.
I know, strange story maybe to bring it up.
Anecdotes, I like
It's an
this.
anecdote.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
an
that's
anecdote.
great. That's great.
But anyhow, he is a Frenchman. He went by the name of Charles Blondin here.
Sure.
He came over to North America in the 1850s. In
Yeah.
1859, he's the first one to traverse Niagara Falls on a tightrope.
Wow.
And he did some amazing stunts. Like
Sure.
he went on, like he became, I think, the greatest tightrope walker ever. Anyhow, he did one where he took a wheelbarrow.
Yeah.
He filled it up with rocks
Yeah.
and walked the tightrope. No, nothing to hold.
Wow.
And just went on a tightrope, came back and forth safely. The people are just going wild and cheering him on. And he says, "Do you believe in me?" And they go, "Yes, we believe in you."
Wow.
And he says, "Do you believe I could take a person in that wheelbarrow and wheel them across safely?" Wow. And many of them, maybe not all, but many of them were yelling, "Yes, we believe you could do it." And one of the guys standing right in front of him, really close to him, he saw him saying, "I believe you can do it."
Yeah.
So you know what he did? He looked at the young man, pointed right at him in front of the rest of the crowd, and said, "Then get in the wheelbarrow." Faith is when you get in the wheelbarrow.
Wow. That's heavy.
Ultimate trust and commitment.
Wow.
That's faith. So you can have a belief,
Yes.
but that's an intellectual thing, but it's not faith.
Can I say this? Do you like faith? I want to go deeper into faith. In the last few years, I've dealt in people passing away, death, which I want to talk to you more about, and not really knowing how to navigate through those things. You know, I've been to funerals, I've been to I've known of people passing away, elderly, but when a young person passes away, sort of like in our society, we think maybe that's before his time or their time, and then you're like, why? Like, why did that happen? You sort of lose faith. Or maybe or lose belief, or no, you're losing faith in like humanity. How could this happen? But still, being a young person myself, or youngish, I still want to have faith in my life. How do you look at those sort of things? You know, like losing faith, getting it back. Like what? You know, I say this. I'll tell you why this subject matter is so interesting to me. Whatever your faith is, whatever your belief system is that there's a time in your life where you feel like you need something more. And when you're feeling like, oh my God, has that been taken away from me? Or, oh, there's an example of why it shouldn't even exist, or something in your head that happens. When do you get your faith back? How do you get your faith back when something has been so like fundamentally taken away from you?
I don't know whether there's some formula.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
right.
that one could point to and say, this is how you get your faith back. For people who lose their faith, this becomes really difficult for them, but it's understandable.
Sure.
When you face really, horrific tragedy.
Yes.
It's when we face those things that draws people back to their faith. My brother's an example of that. My brother and I were both brought up as I'm just a cultural Catholics.
Sure.
We were baptized, we were confirmed, but there was no discussion of religion in our home, etc. So we didn't really have a real faith.
Yeah.
But we weren't atheists or anything like that.
Yeah.
But we had no real faith. We weren't practicing Catholics at the time at all. My brother in his late teens and early 20s, and I could say this, he's no longer with us now, but I could say this and he would not object to anything I would say, is that he was a womanizer, he was a druggie, he was an alcoholic, and he was super selfish.
Wow.
And he would admit that's what he was like.
Yeah.
Then he got cancer at age 23.
Wow.
And it was third stage lymphoma, which back in that day, for third stage Hodgkin's, back in 1974, that was a 50-50 shot whether you survive.
That's right.
So it really made him think about his life. Mm-hmm. So it made him think about my life. Up till then, he'd just been living in the moment, just doing whatever he felt like he pleased and whatever satisfied him.
That's right.
And it was two Christians, actually, two friends of his that were Christians. They were a couple that sort of saw him through all of this and were just there for him personally. And what it did was it gave him an understanding about life, looking at life, not just philosophically, but theologically and personally about what does my life really mean?
Wow.
And in the end, just to make the long story short, he sort of really converted back into the faith, so much so he attended seminary and became a pastor of the Lutheran faith.
Wow.
He did a complete 180-degree turnaround because of the tragedy he was facing.
Yes.
Because of the suffering he was
Yes.
facing, the suffering and pain drew him closer to God.
Yes.
So it's not that suffering and pain always draws us away from God and leads to a lack of belief. It can,
Yes.
but it doesn't always do that. And here's the thing I would say to any person. If you want to help solidify your faith
Yes.
going forward in life,
Yes.
make sure you've already thought this through before you hit the major tragedies, because they're going to happen.
Yes, they
if it
are.
doesn't happen to you, it's going to happen to a friend of yours.
right.
And it's going to impact you either impacts you personally, like directly
That's right.
on your own life,
That's right.
or it's going to impact a friend of yours or a family members of
right.
yours. I always say to people, I don't like to be so somber and bring this bad message, but look, either you're going to watch your friends and loved ones die, or they're going to watch you die.
Yeah, that's
No
right.
matter what, you do not escape the pain and the suffering.
Wow.
There's no way to escape it. So what you got to do is prepare yourself for it.
Mm-hmm.
And the way you do that is you can't just, like, for example, if you're a Catholic, you just don't just attend Mass on Sunday.
Yeah.
That's not going to prepare you enough.
Yeah, that's right.
It's good that you attend Mass, don't get me wrong, but you've got to do more than that. You better study your theology and the philosophy behind it. Why did God create the way that he did? Why is there suffering and evil in the world? Do you understand why this all exists the way that it does? And when you do start to understand it,
Yeah.
it gives you a solid faith, so it doesn't, when the wind and the waves come up,
That's right.
it doesn't rock you, it doesn't sink you. You stay afloat because you already have thought it through ahead of time.
So, like, for instance, when I am going through a tough time, like, going through someone passing away and trying to handle that emotionally, I go through deep meditation. I have some Buddhist hymns that play, some Hindu chants that go play, and I feel better after. But there's times where you're just like, almost like, forget what you've learned or what you're listening to. You're just like, I just pray this is over. I just pray this gets over. Like, whatever it may be. Like, you're sitting in a plane, and it starts to have major turbulence. And this is where people, like, hold on to each other, hold on to their seat, and they hold on to they cross their hands and they sit there and they go, please get me through this. Are there times that you've gone through in your life that you've just, like, been like, where faith is, like, when did faith come into your life deeper?
Well, it's interesting. There's a couple of things I would do.
please,
But
yeah.
one of the things is
every saint will tell you.
Yeah. Well, I should say every, because I'm sure there'll be one that maybe didn't.
Sure.
But in many of the saints' stories, they'll all talk about what they call the dark night of the soul.
Wow.
The dark night of the soul. What do they mean?
Yeah.
It's when they're praying to God and they feel like they're not being heard.
Yeah.
They feel like it seems like it's in vain.
That's right.
They're starting to doubt their own faith and their own belief system.
That's right.
And it's because they've encountered some tragedy, something that's happened, and it's making them question things. And they're praying but it seems like it's going nowhere for them.
Yeah.
And a number of them will talk about this dark night of the soul. But every one of them will also tell you that they come out of it in the end, that they go through this dark night where they feel like God is hidden and he's not sort of there for them.
That's right.
But it's because they've thought it through ahead of time that allows them to get through that dark night of the soul.
Right.
There's a Christian writer named Phil Yancey, and he said, Christianity doesn't in any way lessen our pain and our suffering that we go through.
Yeah.
What it does do for us, it enables us to take it, to face it, to work through it, and then convert it and redeem it into something good.
Convert it and redeem it.
To convert it and redeem it.
Taking the tough, taking the hard, learning how to actually face it, and then talk to me about the redeeming of that.
Okay. Let me do it through example.
Sure, examples
And
are
you'll
great.
remember a little bit about this from the talk that I gave. But
Absolutely.
What happens to most of us when we get into that suffering and pain, grief, loss of a loved one,
Yes.
we'll go, why me?
Yeah, why me?
Why did this happen to me?
Absolutely.
Right? And if you remember, I said, well, you know what? I've researched this quite a bit, and I've never come to a satisfactory answer to that question.
Sure.
Why did this happen to that particular person at this particular time? I don't know.
Yeah.
What I do know is this. We go into the why me, and the problem is this. The reason why there's no good satisfactory answer to the why me question is because it's the wrong question.
Oh, okay.
It's the wrong question. Why is it the wrong question? Because when we ask the why me, it keeps us locked into the past negative event, whatever it is, and all our energy is being expended on something we cannot change.
Sure.
And what happens, the longer you stay there, the more resentful you become, the more bitter you become, the more cynical, the more full of self-pity, the more angry, perhaps seeking revenge even. And you become a miserable person, and you're not good for yourself or good for anybody else because you stay in the why me.
That's right.
You're trapped in the prison of your own pain.
Wow.
And it doesn't let you loose. If you stay there, the longer you stay there, the more cynical and bitter you become, the more angry you become, and you're good for nobody, not for yourself or for anybody else. And so it's the wrong question because it doesn't allow you to move forward in your life.
That's right.
And you can only move forward in your life when you then say, it's not why me, it's that now that this has happened, what am I going to do about it?
Wow.
What is my response going to be? Because I can't change it.
Yes.
What I can do is, as Phil Yancey says, I can face it, I can work through it, and I can convert it and redeem it. Now, let me give you some examples about converting and redeeming it. Terry Fox, I'll use a Canadian example that many of us can understand. Right? Terry Fox, he's 18 years old. He lands up getting cancer, and he lands up losing his leg. Well, that's a tragedy.
Sure it is.
That's evil, pain, and suffering that he is going through.
That's right.
We wouldn't wish it on anybody.
That's right.
But it's happened. Well, Terry Fox, by the way, it seems like if he was in the why me, he got out of it so fast. Oh, and if I can just stop here for a second to say to every person who's listening to this, if there's one thing you remember, if ever something bad really happens, and you go into that why me, it's natural to do so, but get out of there as fast as you can and get to the what now. So going back to Terry Fox's story. So what did Terry do? He says, well, okay, I've lost my leg. I've got cancer. What can I do with my life? See, he's looking forward. How can I make my life good again? How can I use my life for something positive?
That's right.
I'm redeeming it. I'm converting it.
That's right.
What does he do? He decides to run across Canada to raise money for cancer research.
That's right.
What he's going to do, he's going to use his life for others.
Yes.
No greater thing can a person do than doing that.
Absolutely.
So that's by converting and redeeming the negative, tragic situation. He converts it and redeems it. If Terry Fox didn't get out of the why me and move to the what now, there'd be no Terry Fox Foundation today.
That's right.
That's raised over $850 million for cancer research. And of course, that just keeps growing every year. There would be no Terry Fox that we'd be talking about. We would not even know about him.
Yes.
And he would not be an icon to so many people.
That's right.
All those things wouldn't have occurred if he stays in the why me. You got to move to the what now. And that's why I say to people, when you face this, you've got to move from the why me to the what now.
That's right.
You know, if I use the example of Rick Hansen, for example, another guy, he's an Abbotsford boy.
Incredible human. Incredible human.
Absolutely, right? But what happened to him? He had everything going for him. If you look at him, when he was 16 years old, he was a solid academic student. He was a great athlete. He had a great set of friends. He had a good family life. That's right. Like for a 16-year-old, that's about as good a life as you're going to get. Falls out of the back of a pickup truck, paralyzed from the waist down. Now, he admits, if you follow his story, he admits he went into the why me and stayed there far too long.
Wow.
He was there for about 7 or 8 months.
Wow.
And he said, I got resent. He used the very words I used. I actually got them from him.
Wow.
Is that he said, I became resentful and bitter and full of self-pity. I said, I was just upset with life. I was angry about everything. And he said, and then finally, he said, it's just like the light dawned. He said, just came on to me and said, Rick, snap out of it. The reality is this, face it. Remember?
Yeah.
Phil Yancey, face it.
Yes.
He says, face it. You're paralyzed for the rest of your life. You'll never walk again.
Yes.
All you being bitter and angry about isn't going to change it.
That's right.
All the energy you're pouring in there is not changing anything. If you want to move forward in your life, it's got to be, what am I going to do about it now? And he did, of course, something very similar to Terry Fox did.
Exactly.
What does he do? Well, he decides to man a motion tour.
Yeah, that's right.
And just, both of them had to train extensively. Like
Absolutely.
The endurance, the strength, the resilience of these men was off the charts to pull off what they did.
That's right.
Okay. He converted it, and he converted his bad situation and turned it into good.
Yeah.
So much so that his character became so impressive that his physiotherapist fell in love with Rick Hansen.
That's right.
Married him.
That's right.
And they've had a couple of kids.
Wow.
And Rick Hansen was asked, if you could go back in time and make it so that accident would never happen,
Yes.
would you do it? If you could magically change it?
Wow.
And he said, he didn't even hesitate. He simply said, no, I wouldn't, because I love the man I've become. I love all the good that I've accomplished. And most importantly, I love my wife I love my children. And if that accident didn't happen, I don't meet her and my children don't exist. So for selfish me, just so I could walk again, would I give up my wife and my children? This is not in your life. He said, and all the good I've accomplished? He said, no way. He said, I love my life the way it is now. Wow. So out of the tragedy, and it was tragic what happened to him, you wouldn't wish it on anybody.
No, of course not.
But he converted it. He redeemed it into something good. And that's what we're called to do with our lives in the end, is to convert and redeem that which is bad and evil. Convert it, redeem it into something good. We're all called, like I would argue this about, in terms of death, you want to die well.
Yeah.
But you can only die well if you've lived well.
Yes, that's right. What are the steps to going into that redeeming quality, like redeeming yourself, like going from suffering to redeeming? What are the steps that you need to take in life? Like, I think I want to actualize something that is practical for people to take away. How do we do that? It's a mindset, I feel.
Well, as I said, one of the first things from my perspective is that make sure you're sure about your faith itself, understand it fully and completely. That's step,
right.
To me,
that's believe in something.
That's not step one.
Yeah.
Step two is actually developing the faith. Like, you can develop some belief, some idea, but you've now got to commit to it. So you got to trust it and commit to it. And the more you trust and commit to it, what are you doing? Well, for example, like my trust and commitment has led me to become a speaker.
Sure. Here we are today. Yeah, absolutely.
It's led me to become a speaker. So I'm trying to actualize the potential by now spreading the message of the gospel of Christ, for example. That's one of my goals. It's something I do. Yeah. So practical steps is that learn everything you can about that which you believe in.
Mastery.
You master it, right? It's like you look at Rick Hansen and Terry Fox. What did they do? They had to master the training.
Yeah.
They prepared them step by step for what the way we're going to do. Absolutely. They had a goal in mind. I want to do this.
That's right.
They took all the various steps along the way.
That's right.
I believe it means talking with other people of faith and learning from their stories that's going to help you.
Yeah.
Talking to people who have experienced tragedies and difficulties when you want to deal with the pain and the suffering.
There is something about relating to others when they're going through the same thing.
Huge.
Right? Like having an experience to say, hey, you've gone through this. Can we talk? It's those, like they have work groups of people who have the same sort of issues or same sort of things that have happened in their life, tragedies, happiness, whatever it may be. And I think that's what goes on in life. That's what attracts people to others. Runners run with each other, like singers sing with each other. I want to talk about your book. Can we show everyone your book here?
Sure.
I want to read this here. So this is how science has discovered God. Okay, so I come from a very scientific family. Everyone's like, engineers, doctors, and we talk about physics, metaphysics. Metaphysics is actually very interesting to me.
Yes.
Can you tell me what you brought together in this book? It's very interesting to me.
Well, a lot of people see that, you'll hear this constantly, oh, well, science and faith, they're incompatible.
Sure.
It's the exact opposite. If you actually look at the history behind science, for example, you'll find that so many of the scientists that, made so many of the major discoveries were people of faith.
Sure.
Many of them were Christian or Jewish or they're Islamic, but they come out of a system of faith, a system of belief in God. And it makes sense because if you believe that a rational, intelligent God created this world, then it's a rational, intelligent world. Well, then it can be discovered. That it can be understood.
Sure.
So faith and science actually go together.
Wow.
They're not incompatible. In fact, they complement each other. That's the key. And you can look at all for example, people say like, well, belief or faith. You'll hear people say, oh, well, that's just that's belief without evidence.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or it's just a blind faith.
Sure.
It's the exact opposite of that. Like, for example, why do I believe in God and why do I believe in the Christian faith? When you believe in the Christian faith, it means you believe and you trust in Jesus.
That's right.
Okay? So why do I believe in God and why do I believe in Jesus? Well, it's not because I just had some spiritual experience of some sort, because anybody can claim they had a spiritual experience.
Yes.
What I did was I looked at all the evidence.
Yes.
I'm one of those people, I have to intellectualize it.
Sure.
That's just the way I am.
Sure.
Okay? So what I've done is that I've looked at all the arguments. I've looked at the scientific arguments, the philosophical, the metaphysical, the theological, the aesthetic, the ethical, the historical arguments. All of these, we've got good, solid evidence that all points towards God.
Wow.
Now, mind you, if you're looking for 100% certainty,
Yeah.
It doesn't exist.
Yeah, sure.
It doesn't even
That's
exist
right.
in science.
That's right.
Because scientific theories are constantly changing,
Absolutely.
developing.
Absolutely.
There's only a few areas where we get certainty. That's in the axioms of mathematics and the axioms of logic. You actually have to trust in the axioms of mathematics and in logic before you can do science.
Sure, yeah.
So you can't, if you're looking for 100% certainty, you're never going to find it. And you'll never go on the journey of faith, for example. If you're looking for 100% certainty, there's always a leap of faith that's involved.
A leap of faith.
Actually, let me give you a quick little story
sure.
about leap of faith, what I mean by that. Reason and evidence will only take you so far. Like I could, for example, somebody could read through my book, for example, and look at all the arguments and still just sort of shrug it off.
Yeah.
And go, because they're not willing to take that next step.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, you talk about steps. You need to take the next step.
Absolutely.
Because faith and reason, there's always that leap of faith. And no matter what you do, there's always that leap of faith. But the leap of faith takes you to the infinite horizon. What do you mean by infinite horizon? John Oberg wrote, he's a Christian writer, and he wrote a book called If You Want to Walk on Water, You Got to Get Out of the Boat.
Yeah.
What he's referring to is the incident where Jesus is walking on water and the apostles are in a boat. And Peter calls out to Jesus and said, basically, command me and I will come.
Yes, that's right.
And Jesus says, come, Peter. And Peter gets out of the boat. Now that's faith, right?
Yeah.
But he actually can see the infinite horizon. He's doing the leap of faith.
That's right.
He's gone beyond reason and evidence.
Yeah.
He takes, why? His trust in Jesus led him to step out of the boat. And for a brief, very brief, momentary time, he walks on water. So in this life, if you want to walk on water, you got to be willing to get out of the boat.
Yeah.
And that takes you to the infinite horizon. Wow. And that's the leap of faith.
So I want to talk about what went into creating this book and why did you create this book?
Oh, well, I remember you introduced me as a teacher of education.
Yes.
Well, I was a teacher at St. Thomas More Collegiate in Burnaby.
Yes.
And I've been a teacher there for 45 years.
Wow.
Right? And one of the key topic areas that I've taught is religious education.
Oh, interesting.
Christianity.
Okay.
And of course, you get asked all these questions by students. And, and I learn from my students because there'll have to be a question sometimes. I'll go, I'm not too sure what the answer is to that. I need to research that out.
That's right.
And what happened was over the years, I just constantly did more and more research.
Wow.
And then there was a couple of people who said, look, I've looked at your notes and stuff. Like, you should write a book.
Wow.
Like you've got so much of it here and you teach so much of it. It's already there in your head. Why don't you put it down on paper and share it with other people?
Yeah.
So that's what sort of led me to write the book.
Great.
And I look at it as a labor of love. Like I look at it, it's like my way of also trying to fulfill part of my purpose and part of my mission is to write this out because it's something I have the ability to do.
Yes.
Right? Like everybody has different skills and abilities,
stories,
right?
Absolutely.
And two things I think I can do is, I think the most important one is to speak. I think I like to see myself as more of a speaker, probably because I've been in front of a classroom for so many years, right? You have to be a speaker, whether you like it or not. And I do like it and enjoy it. But I've also learned that, you know what? I may not be the best writer in the world, but I've learned to write well. And how do I do it? Well, I do it because I've got some really good people who help me edit it.
Yeah.
Who help you out.
Yeah.
But I'm really pleased with the result of it. And I think it does a really great job of expressing, because I sort of do it three-pronged approach.
Sure.
So the science and faith is the whole first half, I would say first 40% of the book is all about science and faith.
Yeah.
Then I go into suffering and evil, and I have 3 chapters on that. And I deal it from different perspectives. So there's all kinds of different areas of the suffering and evil topic that people want dealt with. So I deal with all kinds of different aspects of it. And then I go into the life, the death, and resurrection of Jesus.
Yes.
So specifically really focusing on the claims of Jesus and on his death and resurrection. And I'm looking at everything's done from an evidential point of view.
Sure.
I bring in theology, I bring in philosophy, I bring in metaphysics, I bring in all of it, but I'm always looking at it from an evidence point of view. And in each topic, I always look at what are my atheist and agnostic friends and scholars saying?
Yes.
Because they have important things to add to the picture as well. And we need to be able to address their concerns and their questions because they have valid questions and concerns, and we need to address them. And so I think we can address them civilly and respectfully.
Yeah. When you think about creating a book, when you think about putting pen to paper, is there a moment in time that you're having your leap of faith in that instance?
I wouldn't call it a leap of faith,
but
I would say all of a sudden you get new discoveries.
Yeah.
I think that's maybe what you mean.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call it quite a leap of faith.
About yourself.
Well, what I found was the things that I went, I never even thought about
Yeah.
Until I tried to you try to connect the dots, right?
Yeah.
And then you start to all of a sudden it'll come into your mind. And I really truly believe that is the Holy Spirit guiding me.
Yeah, sure.
In terms of saying, you know what, Darrell, you might want to just look at this.
Yeah.
Have you thought about that? I go, oh my
It's like letting go.
But people do it too.
Yeah.
Right? So you start
Autopilot.
you start talking to other people about your book and about certain things in it, and then they comment on it and you go, okay, I'm adding that in.
Wow.
Here's the thing, it kills me too. Whenever you write a book,
Yeah.
afterwards, you're going, oh, I could have said that. Because you've already learned some new things and you want to add it back in. And you go, but the book's already done. And then, of course, you know what somebody will say to you? Right. It's time for you to write a second book, right? Because you've got more stuff to offer because you keep learning more. But you do learn things about yourself as well, as you said.
Yes.
You learn things about yourself as well as you go through it.
Well, what I appreciated in the lecture that I came to attend was just that you're a storyteller. And that was really what I appreciated. I'm a story listener. That's what I do for a living. I listen to stories. But I appreciated the fact that you put yourself in there. It wasn't just secondhand information.
That's true.
Putting yourself in that. And that's the last thing I want to leave with is putting yourself into your work. Anybody, whether it's a book, whether it's in life, but having faith in yourself. I want to leave with that.
Well, can I tell the story?
Yeah, please.
Okay. I think I know what you're referring to about
absolutely.
putting myself into it. So for your listeners, this is a story of a woman that was 28 years old.
Yeah.
She already had a 2-year-old son and was pregnant for a second time. And during this second pregnancy, it was discovered that she was diagnosed with a very aggressive form of breast cancer.
That's right.
The doctor came to her and said, I'm sorry, but we need to end this pregnancy immediately. We need to begin treatments because, well, you've got this serious cancer and it needs to be treated now. And she said, no, I can't do that. He said, no, perhaps you don't understand. Even if we begin treatments now, it's a really aggressive form of breast cancer. Even if we begin treatments now, you're already well below 50% survival rate.
Wow.
So the longer we wait, your chances become slimmer and slimmer. And the woman said, no, I can't do that. I could never do that. I could never kill my child. I couldn't live with myself if I killed my child. So I'll take my chances.
Wow.
And so she did. And she gave birth to a very healthy baby girl. And then she began her treatments. And those treatments, initially a little bit of success at stemming the cancer, but within 2 years she had died. And of course, this is the story of my wife. So when I talk about the issue of suffering and evil and say this is personal, well, I faced the tragedy.
That's right.
This is the loss of my wife, the why me, the why her,
Sure.
We went through that part of it, etc. But I knew I couldn't stay there, that I had to come out of that. And I very quickly did because I got 2 kids to raise.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? They need a father who's not cynical and bitter and resentful and angry.
That's right.
They need a father who's going to show that life can be good.
Yeah, showing
Because like Phil Yancey said, you got to face it. You got to work through it.
Yeah.
And you got to convert it and redeem it in the end. But it's like, what did she do with her life, right? And I should stop here for a second too, for any of your listeners, is that I don't want to say that every person has to make the same decision that she made.
No, absolutely.
She made a decision based on her own conscience that she needed to make. And she was obviously perfectly in her bounds to do so. But also a woman would have every right to save her own life.
Absolutely.
Right? So I'm not saying that you have to make the same decision that she made. But what did she do? Well, from a Christian perspective now, what did she do? In the Bible, it says no greater thing can a person do than to give their life for another.
Sure.
That's the highest level of Christ-like behavior.
Yeah.
So could she accomplish anything more with her life than that? The answer is no. It's not about living a long life. It's about living a good life, right? That matches the purpose for which you were created.
Yes.
And that's what she's doing. In the scriptures, it says, do not store up for yourselves earthly treasure. Rather store up for yourself heavenly treasure. Right. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be. Where was Lorraine's treasure? Wow. Well, what was her treasure? The baby in her womb. Yeah. Where was her heart? With the baby. Wow. What did Lorraine show? Love, courage, and the willingness to suffer. The love she had for the baby in her womb gave her the courage to be willing to suffer and die on behalf of that child. And that's what the Christian faith is about. It's not about lessening the suffering and pain of this world. Jesus never spoke about that.
Yes.
In fact, he told his followers, if you follow me, they will do to you what they've done to me.
Wow.
He didn't promise them like immunity from the pain and suffering of this world.
That's right.
He said, right, very clearly, in this world, you will have trouble.
Yes, you will.
You will face it.
That's right.
He said, but know this, I've overcome the world. I've defeated death. I have defeated evil on that cross.
Wow.
And you need to follow me. Pick up your cross daily and follow me.
Yeah.
He's saying that's living the good life. As St. Paul said, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race.
Wow.
I have kept the faith. Eddie Hilsom that I talked about earlier,
Yes, that's right.
she fought the good fight.
Yes.
She kept the faith,
Yeah.
right? She finished the race.
Yeah.
She understands that's living, it's dying well by
Yes.
living a life well.
Yes.
That's what Lorraine did. She lived a life well. And everything that she did, she's become an icon in our family
Sure.
of love, of service, of sacrifice. Like nothing greater could she have done, etc. And people say, well, how do you deal with that tragedy, etc. In the end, I look at life as gift.
Yeah.
Lorraine was a gift to me.
Yes.
I had the gift for 13 years.
Yes, you did.
I appreciate the gift that I was given with her.
Absolutely.
And that gift can never be taken away.
Yeah.
And it better to have known and loved her for 13 years than not to have known and loved her at all. And I've got 8 grandkids.
Yes, you do.
Our daughter.
I saw some of them.
Yeah, and our daughter was there at that point there, and she's got 4 boys, and that's the person that, and Lorraine gave her life for.
That's right.
And so her legacy just keeps giving back to the world.
That's right.
Right? And so it just doesn't end there. Everything that she did epitomizes exactly. She had the potential to be Christ-like. She actualized it in her life.
Wow.
And I can look at the tragedy of what happened to Lorraine and say, life is still beautiful. It's still good. It's still meaningful. And if you understand what God's purposes and objectives in creation were, then it makes perfect sense that we would have exactly the world that we do have.
Wow. We're going to end right there. Listen, I appreciate this conversation. I remember when I first came and heard your lecture, I was probably looking for some information on my own faith in life, faith in what was going on in the world, death, and seeing somebody come to that conversation with so much strength and also great examples, like the examples you gave, including your own life, taught me something in that moment. And I appreciated that. And that's why I wanted to have you on here today, is like growing up with a lot of different faiths around me, even not knowing so much about Christianity, but also just knowing someone who understood where they stood, your faith, where it stands. And I appreciate that. I appreciate the conversation. I appreciate the stories. And everyone, if everyone want to check out Darrell's book, we'll put a little picture up of it later. But
There it is again.
Yeah, how science has discovered God, physics, metaphysics, and beyond. And metaphysics, something bigger conversation we'll have there at a later time. But thank you for being on the Human Biography podcast.
Appreciate it. It's been a joy.
Yeah.